All right, so thank you all for joining us for this webinar this morning. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Housing Alliance Pennsylvania. We are a statewide coalition working to increase access to safe, decent, and affordable homes for all Pennsylvanians. We work to fulfill our vision for a home within reach through state and federal policy advocacy, opportunities to connect, share, and learn from your peers, events, and our annual Homes Within Reach conference. If you aren't a member, we ask that you consider joining. You can visit our website to join as a member, or you can contact info@housingalliancepa.org for more information on membership. Today's webinar will run approximately 60 minutes, including questions and answers. If you want to ask the presenters a question, please use the Q&A function. The chat function is only to ask the Housing Alliance logistical questions about the webinar. Again, use the Q&A feature for questions to the presenters. We will email you a recording of this presentation and any associated materials in approximately a week's time. We have virtual Capitol Hill Day coming up on March 24th. So be sure to mark your calendars if you plan to join us. Registration will open for this day coming up Monday, February 7th. And you can visit our events page to register. We hope to see you there. And in case you missed it, we released the following resources and materials. Our PHARE Raise the Cap fact sheet. So please visit the resources page on our website to look at that. And to learn more about our 2022 policy agenda and what we have accomplished in 2021, please visit our website. I will now hand it over to Phyllis to start today's webinar.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Kina, can you stop sharing so Aaron can share?
Sure.
So welcome. We had a really tremendous response to this meeting notice this morning. So we're excited to be talking about an advocacy campaign to increase resources for the State Housing Trust Fund, otherwise known as PHARE. We are aiming to be short and sweet today. What we wanted to do is Aaron Zappia, who is the Housing Alliance's Senior Government Relations Manager, is going to provide an overview of PHARE and also talk about why now is the time to raise the funding cap and increase resources for this very popular and flexible program. We're really thrilled to have two senators joining us this morning who have been champions of this program since it began. And we'll hear them talk about how important PHARE is and what we can do to increase funding for it. Senator Elder Vogel and Senator Art Haywood. And I just want to say, really appreciate you giving us your time this morning, but also for your leadership in the General Assembly in the past and for continuing to make this a priority. So we really can't thank you enough. So what we're really leading up to today is to ask you all to partner with us once again to educate state legislators on why this program is so critical to the work that you are doing in your community, and to ask them to co-sponsor legislation to increase funding for this program. When we think about how we move policy forward, how we increase funding, how we improve state policy, we really can't underestimate the impact that talking about the impact that this has had in your local community has. So if you've had a FARE funding award, you either maybe have it now or had it in the past, talking about how effective it has been, how it's mattered to the people that are now living in affordable housing, and how it matters to the community. If you haven't had a FARE award, talking about what you could do that would benefit the community if there were more funding available. That's really the strength of your participation with us. And just a note about messaging, that there is a researcher named Dr. Tiffany Manuel, who, if you've come to the Housing Alliance's Homes Within Reach conference, you may remember that we've had her as a speaker a few times. And she did research into what works, specifically in talking about messages to build the case for affordable housing and what doesn't work. And her main point is talking about solutions is more effective. We often start with the need. We often start with waiting lists and how many people don't have affordable housing. And there's a place for that. We need to talk about that too. And I'm going to read you just a few sentences from her research. What she said is, a good body of research in the cognitive sciences consistently finds that our brains are wired for optimism. Anchoring your case in problems makes it likely that your stakeholders will disengage. In most communities, people can tell you so much more about the problems they face than any of the feasible or recognized solutions to those problems. So I say all that to say, when we focus on solutions and how effective FARE has been and can be even more effective with more resources, that's how we're successful in moving forward the legislation that we're talking about today. So we have a few ways that we could work together to educate state legislators, and Erin's going to talk a little bit about this, but I just want to preview it. Some of you may know your legislator, and you can pick up the phone and say, I'd like you to consider co-sponsoring this legislation, and here's why. For others who maybe don't know your legislator, and you don't need to know your legislator to engage, maybe sending a letter in support and explaining how this matters for the community, maybe that would make the most sense. And we have a draft template letter that you can use. And then for others, maybe doing that and or requesting a meeting. And we would be happy to participate in the meeting if that would be helpful. And you could contact Aaron and he can coordinate that. So while the Housing Alliance is hosting the event this morning, there are several other organizations that have been meeting and co-coordinating the launch of this campaign. And I just want to acknowledge them and give them a shout out. Regional Housing Legal Services has really spearheaded this initiative. And then Action Housing, Neighborhood Allies, the Pittsburgh Foundation, and UPMC Health Plan have also been working and dedicating time and resources to coordinating this launch. In addition, Policy Solutions is working on an analysis of the FARE program that's funded by Heinz Endowment. So thank you to all of these groups for coordinating this work. Go to the next slide. So some of you might be familiar with FARE's legislative history, but just briefly, FARE, which is the Pennsylvania Housing Affordability and Rehabilitation Enhancement Fund, was created in 2010. In 2012, funding was made available through the Marcellus Shale Impact Fee. Only counties that have Marcellus Shale are eligible to receive that funding. In 2015, a portion of the state Realty Transfer Tax revenue was dedicated to FARE, but it was capped at $25 million. And in 2019, legislation introduced by the two senators that we have today was introduced to increase the cap from $25 million to 40 million. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn it over to Aaron, who is here at the Housing Alliance with us and is our Senior Government Relations Manager.
Yeah, thanks so much, Phyllis. And thanks everybody for joining today's call. We're thrilled with the overwhelming response from people across the state. We're definitely going to need everybody who's on the call today to advocate to get this off the ground and get it done in 2022. So I want to provide a really brief overview of PHARE, what PHARE funds, how it's funded, and why we're making the case this year for a funding increase. So the great thing about PHARE is that it responds to local need. Local organizations from across Pennsylvania apply for PHARE grants. It's a competitive process. We have a big state with varying needs from our big cities to rural areas. The commonality, though, is that in every community, there's housing needs and there's needs for funding. PHARE provides things like rental assistance, new and rehabilitated homes, homeowner repair, which would include weatherization projects, home buyer assistance, addressing blight, demolition of blighted properties, all making way for future homes. So projects can get very specific for certain populations. There's ones for homeless vets, there's ones for the elderly, victims of domestic violence, those exiting the criminal justice system, which we would refer to as the reentry community. Those are just a handful of examples, but you know, PHARE is a very flexible program that responds to local needs. So how is it funded? Where does the money come from for the PHARE program? So the vast majority of funding comes from the Pennsylvania Realty Transfer Tax, and the Realty Transfer Tax, or the RTT. It's a 1% tax on real estate transactions in Pennsylvania. To a lesser extent, the Marsalis Shale Impact Fee funds PHARE, and that is only in counties where drilling is taking place for Marsalis Shale. The least of the funding comes from the National Housing Trust Fund. Okay, so this map represents over 1,000 projects that have been funded by PHARE since 2012. The blue dots that you see on the map represent projects that have been funded from the Realty Transfer Tax. The red dots on the map are projects that have been funded from the Marsalis Shale Impact Fee, and you'll note that those are located in counties where drilling is taking place. Easy to see the vast majority of these projects do come from RTT, Realty Transfer Tax revenue, and you'll note a few yellow dots on the map around Pittsburgh and some around Philadelphia. Those projects have been funded by the Housing Trust Fund. So moving on, you know, and before we get into these numbers, I want to make it abundantly clear to everybody that when we're talking about raising the cap means raising the cap on RTT funding. We're trying to capture a larger portion of RTT revenue. We are not asking for a tax increase, and neither do we want to take so much from the RTT that it could result in a tax increase down the road. I just want to be very clear about that. So RTT, the funds from RTT are driven out to PHARE based on a formula. PHARE receives 40% of the difference between RTT revenue estimate of the base year from 2014-15 of $447.5 million and current RTT revenues. So what that means is they take the current RTT collections, they subtract out the base year, that is the year that the legislature dedicated a portion of RTT funding for PHARE. They subtract out that estimate, $447.5 million. They take the difference. They take 40% of the difference, and that is what is available for PHARE, but it's capped at $40 million. So that could be that could be a little complicated the first time that you look at it, and that's okay. I just kind of want to provide a very summary understanding of how this works. So for example, in the last fiscal year, we had RTT generated about $676 million. making about $91 million available for PHARE, but it was capped at $40 million. So we had 51.5 million additional dollars, that at least a portion of which could have gone for housing. The current fiscal year, we're looking at a very strong housing market. We're looking at a projected revenue of $687 million. Based on this above formula, we could have 95.9 million available for PHARE. Again, would be capped at $40 million. And we could have 55.9 million returned to the general fund. So we're making our case with these funds that are left over essentially after the cap. So this 51.5 that you see, this 55.9, those are the funds that we feel that at least a portion of them can go towards housing. So when we say we want to lift the $40 million cap, these are the numbers that we're working with. And again, this won't be on the exam. So, you know, the important takeaway here is that we want to raise the cap for PHARE. And I'm happy to provide, answer your questions after the call on this. So RTT revenue growth, as I just said, we have a very strong housing market this year in Pennsylvania, particularly. It's actually been that way for the past 7 years. So anybody who wants to own a home right now, anybody trying, whether you're high income, low income, middle income, it's pretty tough because housing prices are, well, they're essentially skyrocketing, along with most costs in general. So if we take a look over the past 7 years, since the legislature dedicated a portion of RTT to PHARE, we have seen a 64% increase in revenue from the RTT. If you do the arithmetic, it's like a 7.6% annual average growth rate. There's good reason to believe that that'll continue into the future, but of course, the housing market is cyclical. But so, the point is that right now we have a lot coming in from the RTT. The tax has grown significantly. There's quite a bit of revenue. So we have a housing shortage. We have a housing shortage at every level. There's very high demand. Coming into the pandemic for many years, there's been a low income housing shortage, and it is quite a crisis here and across the country. So this is a very critical time to try and capture more funds from the RTT to go to housing, because we're at a risk right now for a lot of very vulnerable people and a lot of communities to get left behind as costs are going to go up. Costs are going up for construction, for all housing in general. Okay, so that is actually my last slide. And right now I want to introduce again two of our very special guests, State Senators Elder Vogel and Art Haywood. These guys got it done for us in 2019. They were great champions of the issue. We're very thankful to have them once again going to bat for PHARE. So Senator Elder Vogel represents the 47th Senate District in Western Pennsylvania, Beaver County, Lawrence County, and a portion of Butler County. Senator Art Haywood, out here in the eastern part of the state, he represents a portion of eastern Montgomery County and North Philadelphia. So thank you both very much for joining us today. And perhaps we can start with Senator Vogel, if you can provide us with your perspective on this issue, which you've been involved with now for quite some time, and tell us a bit about what we can expect this year and what you anticipate we may be able to get done in 2022.
Well, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate you having us on this morning. This is a topic that's been near and dear to my heart, like you said, for a good number of years now. And obviously you hit on all the high points of the issue in your PowerPoint presentation here, the need to raise the funding because the revenues have increased so much, but obviously just at the same time, the need for houses and the prices that have skyrocketed so much that have literally cut a lot of even almost middle income people out of being able to afford a first home, especially couples wanting to buy their first home. It's very difficult. And because I own but not on own. I live in the district I live in here. We have a lot of old mill towns, which have a lot of housing that needs to be replaced, that should be replaced. And it, with even that, with rising rents in these older homes like that, it is still putting a lot of people out of reach for them to be able to have a decent place to live in that. So obviously, this is something that I think the time is right. We'll see what the governor's budget address says next week, and we'll talk to the appropriations folks after that and see if there is a way we can possibly increase this either through a tiered response somehow or raise it by another certain amount, because obviously there is a huge need, and the numbers you showed in your presentation here, there is room to be able to do something, I think, and not be able to impact the state general fund monies as well. So obviously it's something we'll be looking at in the coming weeks. And you said we'll hopefully get something together in a month or so and be able to put out a co-sponsor memo to get other senators on board and, and try and get this passed again here this year again to raise the rate. So thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Senator. Very exciting to, to hear that we're going to get something going here in the near future. And so Senator Haywood, who again was with us in 2019 as a sponsor of legislation. Senator Haywood, I'd like to hear from you and get your perspective on PHARE, and what do you think about our efforts here in 2022?
Thank you so much, Aaron and Senator Vogel, who we worked together on this issue, and others, Phyllis and all those in the Alliance. And some of you may know that I was very active, actually a lawyer advocating for affordable housing and representing organizations creating affordable housing for over 20 years before I joined the state Senate. And so this is a critical issue for me, and where I actually do have some experience. And having an opportunity to go from an advocate to being in the legislature to try to get the resources to the families who so desperately need it is a tremendous honor for me. I do think as well, we got an opportunity in this current session, hopefully before June, to increase the cap. As has been clearly described, the resources are there, and that is often a challenge for us in the legislature. But here, the resources are there. I also want to share that there are so many individuals trying to make it in the day-to-day, everyday Pennsylvanians who have shared with me in a tour that I did across several cities, including in McKeesport and in Erie and in Clinton County and in Scranton and in Philadelphia, across Pennsylvania. There are four main challenges for people to make it. First, access to affordable childcare, critical, and we know that is critical now. Second, decent pay, because we're not paying people at the level that they should be paid. Third, transportation, having jobs in the suburbs, but folks working in the cities. And the fourth that was shared, affordable housing. So making housing affordable reaches one of the four main challenges that I heard for people trying to make it here in Pennsylvania. Is a priority, and I'm glad we're trying to meet it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Haywood. Been a great champion of this issue for many years, and for that we thank you. Thank you both. And these two senators represent very different districts on either end of Pennsylvania. Senator Vogel's district is certainly more rural, and the cities in there, as he mentioned, there's a lot of old mill towns with old housing stock. Senator Haywood representing a portion of Philadelphia and Montgomery County, very different landscape. But these two are representing kind of the spectrum in Pennsylvania, and just shows the need and the importance for affordable housing in every single one of our communities. So anywhere that you live, whether and this is the folks who are with us on the call today, no matter where you live, whether you're represented by a Republican, a Democrat, it doesn't matter. Those folks need to hear from you, their constituents, that this is important and this needs to get done in 2022. And, we're here to help you do that. We're here to provide you with the information with the resources that you need to contact your members of the General Assembly, both the Senate and the House, to make the case for raising the cap. So, we're going to put here in the chat, we have a draft letter that you can use with a lot of information in it. And, we encourage you to include your own story about PHARE. We know a lot of the folks that are with us on the call today are actually recipients of PHARE grants, or who are involved with projects, funded by PHARE. So the stories of those projects and how they've succeeded and the people that they've affected, it's very important that members of the General Assembly get to hear that. We'll also provide you with a fact sheet, a pretty comprehensive, a few pages that are going to outline the program, the benefits of the program, the economic impact of PHARE, which is quite significant. We'll have county fact sheets, and depending on where you live, we can get you very specific information on your county that'll translate into legislative districts. Because it's very important, again, that members hear and see what's happening for the people that they represent. So I think at this point we want to move on to some Q&A. So I'll turn this back over to Phyllis, and I think we may have some questions in our chat.
We do. We have a few questions, but if people have additional questions, just a reminder to either put it in the Q&A, or you can also put it in the chat. So the first question is, how do we make a case for housing, recognizing that there are other priorities for the General Assembly? Who would like to take a stab at answering that question?
I will. I'll take a shot at it if you don't mind. Obviously, as I stated earlier, with the old mill towns we have, it just drags the towns down to a degree because of the old housing that you have. People want a newer house with, maybe more than one bathroom and a bigger master bedroom and things like that. And these old small mill town houses don't meet that criteria. So people move out of the towns into the suburbs or someplace else to find what they want in housing, and that leads to less housing in your towns, and that just is a spiraling downward effect that leads to blight and vacant lots and vacant housing and things like that, because the housing stock in these towns isn't meeting the criteria that people in today's age want. So I think that's part of the problem. That's a very easy case to make, because it's pretty much in everybody's district. Somebody has some old towns in their districts everywhere across the state, no matter where you're at. Then they can see the blight that happens. And once blight happens, we know what the real estate numbers say, how much one house on a street drags the numbers for everybody else on the whole street down by X number of dollars. I forget the exact figure, but it's an amount that only one house on a street will do that to a whole community. And you have this compounded over and over and over throughout a town or throughout across the state. You can see the effects it has. So by being able to put more funding into being able to eliminate blight and finding ways for people to own a house and take over these properties, maybe to fix them up or whatever, it just raises everybody's stock in the whole community and in the towns and across the whole state. So it's an easy case to make. We were able to do it a couple of years ago when we did it in 2019, and it hasn't changed. If anything, it's got worse because the price of housing has gone up so much in just the last couple of years that it's made it more difficult for people to, like I said before, to try, and first-time home buyers are basically almost locked out of the market because you can't spend $250,000 or $300,000 for a first-time home. When you're just getting married and starting out in life, why it's very difficult. So it puts them in a huge disadvantage right off the bat. So it's a tough situation, but hopefully we can get the job done again.
Thanks. I would also like to add, it'd be good to share some examples of successful projects with members. In my district, there was a project financed by PHARE that provided repairs to older adults, mostly retired, basically dealing with maintenance that they hadn't been able to handle because they've been on fixed incomes for quite a while. Some of these some of the work that was done was fixing a roof, some was plumbing, but all of it was to help people who were longtime homeowners but retired stay in their neighborhoods. And we know for older adults, staying in the home is the first choice if possible. And having some adaptions, bars for standing up, supports, but also basic repairs, keep people in their home. And as Elder Vogel says, if these older individuals end up losing their homes, in many instances, can lead to blight. And so that's what I would recommend. Find a great project in your area and highlight it.
Great, thank you. Someone is asking, do we know how many requests are received each year that might help display the need for additional? And in the chat, Bryce Moretsky with PHFA answered the question. Thank you, Bryce. For the current round, PHFA received over 300 applications requesting over 100 million of FARE funding, largest level of requests ever. And we do have the information from PHFA about the fact that there's more requests than funding available. So we do have that, and you can use that in talking with stakeholders and legislators. Next question is, does funding for FARE have to be fought for every year? So I think this would be a place to talk about the dedicated funding source.
So I don't know if Aaron wants to address that, but we don't have to every year get an allocation of FARE. That allocation has already been adopted, and that's the 40 million. What we're seeking here, though, is to increase the cap so that there's more funding available, but there's not an annual determination of the dollars available. One approach that we have discussed to some extent is increasing the cap over time. So we might increase it by, I don't know, $25, $30 million this year and increase it by another level in 2 or 3 years, so that every 2 years we don't have to come and have a conversation about the cap. And then hopefully we can get some resolution on what the cap is and get it to grow over time. But no, we don't have an annual budget conversation about the cap, only to the extent that we try to increase it periodically.
Yeah, that's exactly, Senator. It would be great to have something durable for the long term. If we do anticipate a steady increase in revenue from the Realty Transfer Tax, it would be nice to have a cap that we know is going to be good policy in 7 to 10 years from now, if possible, right? If it's possible. But exactly, it is a dedicated funding source. It is, enacted. It is law that, every year the FARE will receive funding. But it'd be nice to not have to advocate for a much needed cap increase every couple of years.
All right, next question. What are some tools and strategies organizations that directly serve residents can use to engage residents? This is really important, so I'm glad that this was asked. Who'd like to answer that?
So in the legislature, so it's a little challenging to describe how residents can be organized. I would guess go back to my prior experience and say that getting residents to write letters to their elected officials counts. Getting residents to make calls to elected officials count. Given the spread of the virus, I'm not sure I'm encouraging people to do a whole lot of meetings in person, but certainly virtual meetings, I would highly recommend. There's some organizations which have a meeting with me or someone in my office almost quarterly to talk about the issues that are concerned to them. And so that's a good way to have your voice heard. So that would be my main suggestions: calling, writing, and meeting with legislators. And volume counts. If I could get 2 letters on an issue, I may not pay any attention to it. If I get 30 or 40 letters on an issue, good chance I'll pay more attention to it. So volume does count.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that quickly. Obviously, what Senator Haywood just said was what I was going to basically say. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. I mean, so the more people that write in and call and send emails on an issue saying, and this is what we need, and this is what we really support, and you send it to all the members of the Senate and the House, that they can see it, that this isn't a 2-person issue. This is a statewide issue with hundreds and hundreds of folks calling in and sending emails and things like that. Way it really makes a difference when it comes time to go to your committee meeting and get your other committee members and the full Senate or the full House to vote on something. Why they have X number of constituents in their region or district that have contacted them. So they always look at that number of, like he said, a number of people that contact you on an issue has a lot to do sometimes with how people vote. So yeah, I would highly suggest that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's a lot of organizations that are represented on our call today. And, these are people in the housing community, and reach out to other people in the housing community that may not be involved right now with the Housing Alliance and may not be on the call. And even look outside of housing. Look at local businesses that care about this issue. Look at at local or regional banks that might care about this issue. Be creative, and the more people that you can connect with and ask them to join the cause, the better.
Great. Next question: is there a specific week or day that we should be advocating for raising the cap?
Well, I think we want to gather support for this as quickly as possible. I mean, in the coming weeks, we anticipate a co-sponsorship memo to be circulated, but in the past, this has actually gotten done as part of the budget process. So it would be good to get things moving, and if we had to think of this in terms of a deadline, maybe the end of June, preferably before that. But I think it is a possibility that this does get done as part of the budget process.
Then there are a few questions about, I'm sorry, did anyone, Senator Vogel, did you want to say anything? I saw you go off mute, or
I'm just
no?
going to add to what Aaron said there. Basically, last time it was rolled into the budget process, and the budget process usually gets started the first week in June or rolls on through June because we have to be done by June 30th. So to get this through the committee and into the budget process by the 1st of June is what would be pushing for right now. So it is imperative, like I said, next week or month we get a co-sponsor out to really get everybody to get on board as fast as they could with their legislators to tell them the importance of this, and so we can hopefully get it into a position where it's a talking point or an issue come budget season in June. So yeah, thank you.
Great. So there are a few questions about how FARE funding can be used and whether or not it can help a certain type of program. And I'm going to put a link to PHFA's webpage in the chat. And there's a lot of great information that PHFA makes publicly available. There's a 2022 plan for how FARE will be used, with a lot of good information that should help you with putting together an application. Then you can also see all of the projects that have been funded in the past. So I don't want to get into, I don't want to speak for PHFA. So I would just direct you to that website. But what I would say is that one of the reasons that this program is so popular among us in the sector, but also among legislators, is that it is incredibly flexible. So you can use it for quite a large range of activities related to improving the housing and community development needs in the community. So again, go to that link and go to PHFA's website to see a lot of great information about how it can be used. So next question, we talked a little bit about the cap, but there's a question about, is there any thought given to eliminating the cap, which is arbitrary, and therefore tying it more directly to the revenues generated from the hot housing market, to the housing crisis created by the unrestrained market? I will say, before I ask someone if they would like to answer that, it is tied to revenues generated from the housing market, because when the housing market is strong, the state realty transfer tax is higher in revenue. So it already is. But does anybody want to answer that in a little more depth?
I guess what you're asking is there an appetite or the ability to do it on a tiered formula rather than just having an arbitrary cap at 40 or 50 million or whatever it might be? You would like to have it tiered somehow as to how much money is brought in to how much money, like a formula. Right now it's 40%, I think, is what it is. Is that what the person is asking, I guess, in a way?
I believe it's that, but also questioning whether the cap should be eliminated. So I think it's both.
Yeah, I think the eliminations are more challenging, given that we've had a piecemeal approach to this. I haven't seen in the General Assembly a willingness to completely eliminate the cap. And obviously that's why we've had the piecemeal approach. So our greatest success has been $15, $20 million at a time. And I think that's the most likely path to success.
Yeah, I would just like to add, right now, the housing market is on fire. But if we have another downturn in the economy and the housing market goes in the tank like it did a few years back, why having your number set where it's set at saves you versus removing the cap, and all of a sudden your 40% might only be 20 million versus 40 million. If you understand what I'm trying to say there, is if you have another bad downturn, the cap is set, the cap is what it is, but to remove the cap, you might get 60 million, but then you might turn around and end up with 20 million if things go bad. So that's just another thing to think about.
Okay, thanks. So next question is, can you describe what the opposition to this might be, if any, and how we can speak specifically to those opposing arguments?
One challenge concern that we've had in prior years has been around real estate agents concerned that the legislature might change the real estate transfer tax because we need more money to operate. Because as we all know, what doesn't go to PHARE goes to the General Assembly. So there has been a real concern by realtors that if all the dollars go to PHARE, then there might be more pressure on the transfer tax. Do we increase the transfer tax? And then it makes it much more challenging to buy and sell housing. And that's been the main concern. I think that we've been able to address that each year. Of course, if we took a position of elimination, we would increase the risk or perceived risk. So I think that's another reason we've taken this kind of step-by-step approach. But that's one of the concerns I've heard from the realtors. Obviously, I don't, Elder Vogel, we don't want to do anything to make it harder to buy and sell properties. Have no interest in changing the transfer tax amount, none. But there has been a fear that that might happen.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking to see, I think that most of the questions, the additional questions have already been answered. So again, if you're asking questions that I think PHFA would be better suited to answer so that we don't speak for them, I would just direct you to all the information that they have. There's a few thoughts about what PHARE could do in addition to what it does now. So I would direct you to PHFA. We'll put in the chat again the resources that are on our website for contacting legislators and educating them about the importance of this. So I just want to reiterate what was already said, that we anticipate a co-sponsorship memo in a few weeks. Talking to legislators sooner rather than later is always important, but once we have the co-sponsorship memo, we will let everyone know. Our resources on the webpage include a draft letter. It's heavy though on insert your story here, right? Because as we've already talked about, talking about the impact of the program on your work and your community is the most powerful. We also have a fact sheet, and we also have a way for you to tell us that you want to stay involved. And then there's one more question I see. So there, right now we are focused on Senate legislation, not House legislation. And we'll be talking with our two champions and House members about whether or not we do want to pursue a House version of the legislation. Before we end, I just want to see if anyone, Senator Vogel, Senator Haywood, or Aaron, if you have anything else that you'd like to add.
I would just like to thank everyone for participating. This is an issue where I think we can win. It will require your involvement, but I really want to thank everyone for their participation and advocacy and dedication, because as we all know, the PHARE program is saving homes, but also saving communities and creating opportunities for families and individuals that otherwise would not be present.
I likewise would just like to thank everyone for the opportunity to be on with everyone today, and just stay involved and get involved. Like I said, once we get the legislation out, to really be involved in getting hold of your legislators and touching base with them and giving them a story from your community, how it has impacted your community or someone you know. And those kind of stories are great because they really let the legislators know that it is impacting someone. It's not just out there somewhere in a lot of land, that something personal that's close to them. Really, it makes a difference as well. So I will definitely, like I said, get working on this in a few weeks here if we can, and hopefully get something done to be able to raise the rate here sometime before the end of June. So thank you all once again for having us on today.
Thank you both. Thanks, Senator Haywood. Thanks, Senator Vogel. You know, we've got a lot of optimism. I think we can get this done. And just, you know, again, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help everybody on this call advocate in any way that I can. If you have an interest in meeting with a legislator, we can make that happen. Again, you know, letters, phone calls, we're here as a resource for you. We'll help you tell the story. We'll be as involved, you know, as you'd like us to be, but we do need everyone's help.
Great. And I just want to note, Senator Vogel and Senator Haywood, there's quite a few thank you to the both of you for your leadership. So I'll say it 3 times. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. As has already been said, stay involved, communicate with us. Together, we can make this happen. So thanks for joining today, and talk to everybody soon.